Hear you. All right, we're here finally to provide you homebrewing guidance and tips, equipping you with all sorts of beer knowledge. My name is Tim Falk. I'm the customer service manager here. Today we are bottling our Grand Bohemian Czech Pilsner refill. It's the beer we brewed for our first Twitch stream. I will be demonstrating how to carbonate in the bottle carbonating, with priming sugar and carbonation drops. This is the beginner stream, so we're going to do something pretty basic today. If you're interested in forced carbonation, there will be a stream on that coming up. And we also have a forced carbonation blog on Mr.Beer.com/blog. In order to bottle, we are going to need 1 packet Here's someone online or on our forums saying that they get more carbonation one way or the other. I have never personally experienced that. I kind of suspect these people aren't using level teaspoons. If there are any of them in the chat, they are going to be now swearing up and down. Audio gone. No sound.
Now it's back. That was the sound. It's back.
Back. Okay.
Good to go.
All right. I don't know where you lost me. We're going to be bottling, like I said. We're going to be using carbonation drops and priming sugar. Priming sugar refers to table sugar that you put directly in the bottles to carbonate your beer. 1 teaspoon of table sugar is the same as 1 carbonation drop. You will occasionally hear people swear up and down that they get more carbonation or less carbonation with one or the other. I just have not seen it myself. I kind of suspect that those people aren't using level teaspoons, but if there are any of them watching this right now, they are definitely about to jump in the chat and tell me I'm wrong, as they do every time. But I'm telling you guys, there's no difference. We're also going to go ahead and use a bottling wand, which limits your beer's exposure to open air, lowering the risk of infection and exposure to oxygen or oxidation, both of which can cause off flavors. When we talk about glass bottles, we're going to be using cappers. We carry 2 kinds. One of them is a hand capper. As the name implies, you hold it in your hands and cap your glass bottles. We also carry bench cappers, which you can screw down to a tabletop or countertop. And the nice thing about these ones is you only need 1 hand to operate the bottling mechanism. So you can use the other hand to hold your bottle in place, which is a nice feature. So it's going to be time to bottle after about 3 weeks. You'll know the beer's done when it doesn't taste sweet and when it kind of tastes like flat beer. You will want to keep in mind that there are certain styles of beer that are supposed to be sweet, like milk stouts. Wheat beers can also give the impression of sweetness due to their low IBUs, like we talked about last week. So keeping other factors in mind, if your beer tastes super sugary sweet, you might want to think about giving it more time. We don't recommend going longer than about 4 weeks in the fermenter. The way our fermenters work, they have these little notches in the threads where the lid screws on that lets carbon dioxide out. Now at about the 4-week mark, the layer of carbon dioxide starts to dissipate, and then your beer starts getting exposed to oxygen. When your beer gets exposed to oxygen, it develops an off flavor that kind of tastes like wet cardboard. It takes a couple weeks to months to develop, so you might have beer that tastes good when you bottle and doesn't taste so great when you open it. That's going to be the case with a lot of the issues we discuss. If something goes wrong on bottling day, you're not going to notice for weeks or maybe months. So that's why you need to be really careful, because it's not always going to be obvious, and some beers have to condition for a long time before they taste much good. We're going to be talking about conditioning a little bit more later. Bottling and conditioning, by the way, are both covered in some outstanding blogs up on our website. I am much nicer than that guy, Josh. That's very true. He's a grumpy man. Not me, though. I am Mr. Kindness. So it's perfectly fine to taste test your beer before it's carbonated. It's just going to be flat beer. You know, kind of gross, I guess, but not that big of a deal. If there's any off flavors that have developed, you might notice them at this point, at which point you'd want to give us a call, shoot us an email, go on our website and chat with us. We'll help you figure out what went wrong, send out replacements if need be. So that if that should arise, which can to the best of brewers, it might today. If you don't notice any off flavors, it tastes like flat beer, you don't feel like you need to give it any more time and you're ready to bottle, you're going to go ahead and transfer your beer into bottles. And depending on the bottle size, you're going to add a certain amount of sugar. Now we have this handy dandy chart that's up on our website that tells you how much sugar to use by bottle size. Now we're going to be using today 740 milliliter bottles. We have some half liter, or that's about a pint, so about a pint bottle. Those are both plastic. We have 12 ounce and 16 ounce or half liter glass bottles, one of which are swing tops. All right, so we're going to be switching it up quite a bit today. Now, a quick note on priming sugar. That is a common question from beginners. Can I add more sugar or more carbonation drops to get more carbonation? Or less sugar to get less carbonation? The short answer is yes. However, it's kind of hard for us to come up with an exact number to tell you for how much less to use without getting into some really weird specifics like telling you to use 7/16 of a teaspoon. So what I usually recommend if you want to change up your carbonation levels is when you do a batch, do all your bottles the same size and do 3 bottles with one amount of sugar, 3 bottles with a different amount, usually going up and down 1/4 teaspoon twice in each direction from where you've been doing. And if you label them, when time comes to drink, you'll be able to kind of do side-by-side comparisons and tell what level of primary sugar is right for you. We have a lot of brewers with a lot of different opinions about their carbonation. Everyone likes a different level in their beer, different styles. If you want to get real technical and out in the weeds, are supposed to have different levels of carbonation. We're not really going to address that. This is the beginner stream. So as always, everything that touches our beer is going to be sanitized. So we're going to take half a packet of our no rinse cleanser and we're going to mix it in with a gallon of water. The carbonation drops do work great. They make bottling day much quicker. However, I would note, because it's another common question, there will be no difference in the finished product, whether you use sugar or dextrose or carbonation drops or anything else. We get a lot of people who want to know if they can add stuff like honey or brown sugar to their bottles to get carbonation. Now, while this technically will produce carbonation, the amount you're adding to the bottles for carbonation is not enough to impact the flavor of your beer. If you want to add stuff like honey or brown sugar for flavor, you need to do it in the primary fermentation. By the time bottling day comes, it's too late. So using anything other than carbonation drops or table sugar is a waste of your money, so don't bother. And also, if you do something like that, you're going to kind of have to dial in the amount you would use because, you know, different honeys have different amounts of sugar. Dextrose and table sugar are not the same thing. You need to add different amounts. So I highly, highly suggest to everyone to just use table sugar or carbonation drops. And I especially recommend to our beginners to just go by our guidelines the first couple times just to get an idea of what they are. So I'm going to mix in my no-rinse cleanser real quick. Now, as we've discussed, everything that touches the beer needs to be sanitized because beer is a very attractive environment for bacteria, yeast, and mold, wild yeast that is. Now, none of these things are going to make anybody sick. The kind of bacteria that make people sick don't grow well in beer, but they will cause off flavors. And like I said, you will not notice these off flavors until it comes time to drink your beer. So, for example, just a couple weeks ago, I had a beer that I had bottled and I let condition for 6 months. And when I opened the bottles, it had gotten oxidized. It tasted like wet cardboard. It was no good. Now, you're going to want to take your bottle and kind of fill it up with some no-rinse cleanser. It can be kind of tricky to fill up the bottles if you use a small container, but just a little bit is really enough. And actually, you're going to want to go ahead, if you're using the plastic bottles, these are our standard 740 milliliter PET bottles. These are the ones that come with the kits. You screw on this cap, and so you hear that little clicking sound from the this little ring popping off. They are on all of our caps. They don't need to be on there or anything. If you broke off these little rings before you bottled, that's just fine. People do that. I just break them off by screwing them on tight, and then when you unscrew the cap, these rings are going to stay on usually. That's just fine. If they slip off, that's fine too. Just throw them away. Don't even worry about them. I like to give my bottles kind of a little squeeze to make sure that no air is getting out. If the cap's not seated right, or if there's any kind of issue with the cap of the bottle, it might not seal. If the bottle doesn't seal, it won't get any carbonation in your beer. So the way bottle carbonation works is that the yeast eat up the priming sugar from the table sugar or carbonation drops you're going to add, and then they turn it into carbon dioxide, which builds up in the bottles, which are airtight. And then once the pressure builds up enough, it starts forcing the gas into the liquid, and then you get your bubbles in your foam. Alright, so there's one bottle down. So, if you just have what came with your kit, your bottles and your fermenter, that's just fine. You can bottle without a bottling wand. You're going to go ahead and hold your bottle at a bit of an angle. You're going to go ahead and open your spigot. You're going to fill up your bottle until it's about 2 inches from the top. And you might get a little bit of foam there. That's okay. Now, it does not matter even a little bit whether you put the carbonation drops in before or after. Some people do it the one way, some people do it the other. And for these 740 milliliter bottles, we're going to go ahead and use 2 carbonation drops per bottle. So now that those are in, we're going to go ahead and tighten down the bottle as much as we can by hand, or tighten down the cap rather as much as we can by hand. Again, give it another little squeeze to make sure there's no air getting out. And then you're going to let it sit at about room temperature. Over 65 degrees Fahrenheit will work. The warmer you go, the faster it'll work, up to about the mid-70s. I wouldn't go too much warmer than that, or you might get some off flavors. Let's see those muscles, Tim. Such as they are, yeah. Now, to speed things up, we're probably going to go ahead and use our Star Sand for the rest of our bottles. And I'm going to go ahead and talk you through some general principles of bottling. While I do that, so, if I can find it, there it is. I got it. So, bottle conditioning, as in carbonation, is the home brewer and small brewery approach. Forced carbonation is typically going to be done by your commercial breweries. Now, that does not mean you can't force carbonate at home. You absolutely can. We sell a system called the Kegaroo on our website. And we have a great blog about forced carbonating as well. Again, this is the beginner stream, so we're not going to worry about that too much. Real quick, we're also going to get our bottling wand set up. Now, what a bottling wand is, it's just a little plastic tube, food grade plastic, with this little spring loaded piece at the end. And what this does is cuts off the tube, or rather cuts off the flow of liquid when you move pressure away, when you take your bottle away. So what this means is that once you're using a bottling wand, you can go ahead and just leave your spigot in the on position and have both your hands free to work with the bottles. So I'm going to sanitize this real quick. Bottling wands also minimize your exposure to oxygen, bacteria, wild yeast and mold, all that kind of stuff. Oh, real quick, we also have a few different spigot designs out there, so I'm going to go through how the bottling wand works, because the wand will work with all of our spigots that are out there, because we sell it with this little piece of adapter tubing. As you can see there, we use tubing with 5/16 inch inner diameter and 7/16 inch outer diameter. And as you can see, the bottling wand fits kind of snugly in there. You might have to run it under under hot water for a minute or two to make the plastic flexible enough, but it will fit in there. You kind of just got to work it. Now, this is our older spigot design. It has this side-to-side, wow, this is an old one. We need to clean this better, guys. Josh. This is our older spigot design. It just has a slightly different mechanism to open and close it. For these ones, you put the bottling wand, or rather the adapter tubing, over this little piece sticking out of the bottom where the beer comes out. All right. And then, like I said, the bottling wand goes up in here. If you have one of our Cooper's DIY kits or one of our Brewmax fermenters, you have one of these white taps that work like this. By the way, just a quick note, if you ever need to order one of these, you need to go ahead and give us a call. They're not up on the website. I am not going to say it. I will not say that word. This is a family podcast. These are body parts. All right, so with these ones, the adapter tubing kind of just goes up into the opening there. Now, our newer spigots, the one you're going to see on bottle cam here, you just put the bottling wand directly up into the spigot, just like I showed you with this one, except without the bottling, or rather without the adapter tubing. So, there we go. And like I said, with these, you just move to the open position and push the bottle up against it. So like I was saying, beer exposed to oxygen can undergo oxidation, giving it a stale cardboard flavor and aroma. The yeast in the bottle eat up oxygen and produce things that don't taste good with that oxygen. Homebrewers and small breweries can have a hard time keeping oxygen out of their bottles, which makes bottle conditioning a good choice because the carbon dioxide kind of forces everything out of there. The only real downside is that many consumers don't like the appearance of yeast in their bottles, or as we'll go over here in a minute, your bottles also have a little bit of trub in them. Now, trub is that sediment that is produced by fermentation. We're going to notice here on the bottom of our fermenter. It's just a byproduct of fermentation. It's made of spent yeast and malt particles. And it doesn't make you sick or anything if you swallow any, but it doesn't taste very good. So you're going to want to minimize the amount that ends up in your bottles from the fermenter using a technique we call cold crashing, which I believe we have a blog post about. You're going to go ahead and throw your fermenter in the fridge for 24 to 48 hours right before you bottle. That makes all that sediment settle to the bottom and become compact. If you prop up the spigot end of the fermenter or the book or something like that, it works even better because all that trub settles away from the spigot. But like I said, you're going to end up with a little bit in your bottles regardless, because fermentation is technically a kind, or rather carbonation is technically a kind of fermentation. So there's going to be a little bit of sediment down here at the bottom. A lot of people think it's priming sugar or carbonation drops that haven't been mixed in with the beer correctly. That's not correct. It's just a byproduct of the fermentation that's happening in the bottles. We're going to switch it up a little bit and go ahead and use a swing top bottle next. A swing top bottle is also known as a Grolsch bottle. It's kind of nice because the cap is attached to the bottle, as you can see. It's sealed by pushing that wire down. And then, yeah, you can put in carbonation drops before or after. It doesn't matter at all. With priming sugar, I usually like to do it first just because I feel like it's a little less messy. With these half-liter, 16-ounce bottles, you're going to go ahead and use 1 carbonation drop per bottle just to soothe Pocket Junior and Mr.Beer Josh's anxiety. I don't know what the big deal is, guys. But, at any rate. Now, glass bottles have a couple advantages. The first of which is people kind of, as Mr. Beer Josh points out, there is the headspace issue to consider. I haven't really had any problems from it, but it's always good to be extra cautious. Now, like I was saying, glass bottles, one, people kind of like the look of them better, and second, your beer will last a little longer in them. With those standard plastic bottles that come with the kits, you'll get about 12 to 18 months out of them before the beer starts getting off flavors. Depending on the temperature where you store them, the colder it is, the longer it lasts. We also sell some oxygen barrier bottles, which are slightly thicker plastic bottles, and as the name implies, they kind of prevent it from developing those off flavors and ever letting oxygen seep through. Those will last about 3 years. Glass bottles and swing tops are pretty much indefinite as long as they're sealed right. If you're going to condition for a long time and you're using a swing top, you might want to entertain the idea of using one of these standard metal caps that I'll show you here in a minute instead of the ceramic one. Now, next, for the standard 12-ounce long neck glass bottles, those call for 3/4 teaspoon of a table sugar or 3/4 of a carbonation drop. Now, the carbonation drops are very difficult to cut. Even if you have a pill cutter, it can be a bit of a challenge. And cutting to 3/4 is kind of an odd measurement. So I usually recommend table sugar if you're going to be using halves and quarters and all that. So we sell this product. It's very cheap. It's kind of handy. You might want to think about adding it to your next order. It's this sugar measure. This end, as you can see maybe on the camera, is 1 1/4 teaspoon. Not a terribly useful measure, but this side is 3/4 teaspoon, which is extremely useful because that's what these 12-ounce bottles call for. So we're gonna sanitize our bottle and our caps, and we're gonna go ahead and use table sugar on this one. Now, twist-off caps are not really feasible in home brewing. You're only going to be using pry-off caps, and to cap those, you're going to need what's called a capper. There are 2 kinds. Like I said, there's this hand capper that I'm going to use the first time around, and then there's this bench capper. We'll do the best we can to show you those. So, like I said, I'm using table sugar for this one. If you spill a little bit, that's okay. If you don't clean it up, Josh will yell at you. And we just sell regular old metal crown beer caps. Obviously, you're going to want to sanitize this guy too.
So I can see it. See it being capped.
Yes. So, as you might be able to see, the capper has a little magnet in there. So you just go ahead and seat the cap like so. Then you fill up your bottle. Now, you might read online in other homebrewing forums or blogs and stuff like that about how some people are gonna repitch yeast, which means to add more yeast when they bottle. With our kits, that's just not really necessary. We're working on a really small volume, so there's going to be plenty of live yeast cells in there. If you're doing some kind of crazy high attenuating beer, or maybe you had some old yeast, or there was some kind of fermentation issue, you might want to entertain the idea of repitching sometimes, but for beginner stream purposes, if you feel like you might need to, call us, otherwise don't worry about it. So, you put the bottle up. That can happen sometimes. Then you kind of have to press down to hold the bottle straight, and it kind of gives a little bit when it seals, and as you can see, it's carbonated, or rather, it's sealed just fine. And of course, like I said, we have the bench capper, which is kind of nice because you can bolt it down to your surface so it doesn't slide around. Oh my goodness. So it doesn't slide around so much. This one might be a little tough to see on camera, but now, one of the most common questions I get, especially from new brewers at the 3-week mark, is, Tim, why isn't my beer carbonated? And I say, caller, that's a great question. Their most likely candidate, especially in the cooler months of the year, is that the temperature got too low. If the temperature gets below about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, the yeast will go to sleep. If the yeast are asleep, they're not going to be able to ferment that priming sugar into carbon dioxide. Your beer won't be carbonated. So if that should happen, you just move your beer somewhere warmer, and then the yeast wake back up. They eat up the sugar, and you get your carbonated beer. The second most common problem would probably be that for whatever reason the cap didn't seal right. If you think you have a cap that didn't seal right, go ahead and give us a call, because that one can get kind of complicated. As you can see, you kind of push it until it gives a little bit. If you're feeling bold, you can turn it upside down over Josh's nice clean floor that you won't have to mop up, and make sure it's not leaking. We're going to go ahead and bottle the rest of them in plastic. The nice thing about plastic, and the big reason I recommend it for beginners, is it's fast, it's easy, and it's hard to mess up. Also, the priming sugar and carbonation drops make it really easy to use the drops, which speed up bottling day considerably, but again, make no difference in the finished product. Nice thing about glass bottles, though, is that you can reuse old ones as long as they had pry-off tops, not twist-off. Like I said, that won't really work for our purposes. You can also use any plastic bottle that held something carbonated before. So you could use a 2-liter soda bottle, for example. If you're using a clear bottle, you got to keep your beer away from any sunlight, because ultraviolet light is what skunks beer, not heat. Now, let's see. The carbonation usually takes about 3 weeks to develop. It can be as little as 2 if you're in some kind of hurry. But I usually leave it a full 3 weeks just because I don't want to have to open a bottle and say, ah, damn, it's not carbonated, and then just lose a bottle of beer and still have to wait another week anyway. Let's talk about conditioning for a minute. Conditioning refers to the process of allowing your beer to mature in the bottles for a period of weeks to months, sometimes years, for the purpose of letting the flavor mellow a little bit. Now, as we all know, even as beginners, fermentation produces oxygen, it does not produce any oxygen at all. What it does produce, though, is carbon dioxide and alcohol. Those are not the only things it produces, though. It also produces a whole bunch of other compounds with names like esters and fusel alcohols and acetaldehyde and a bunch of other big words. But the point is, all these other things have flavors. And some of those flavors can be kind of harsh or unpleasant, and we want them to go away. So we give the yeast time to kind of eat up these byproducts of fermentation. Now, the beers that tend to need more time conditioning are higher ABV beers and dark beers. Those tend to taste pretty harsh right as soon as fermentation is done, and they need time to mellow. Stuff like barley wines, wheat wines, really high gravity beers, your imperial porters and stouts. Those are going to need to sit for a good long time before they're very smooth. I would also note that beer is kind of like wine in that it tends to get better as it ages, just broadly speaking. So, I recommend storing your beer at room temperature instead of the fridge because, as we've discussed, anything below 65 is too cold for most yeast to work. The exception is lagers. We're not going to talk about that much because this is the beginner stream. The general idea is you're going to want to condition at the same temperature where your beer fermented. No, do not use mason jars, please. Because if you use mason jars, you will call me and say, Tim, my mason jars exploded. There's beer everywhere. It got all over my prized Beanie Baby collection, and I need a new refill. And I will cheerfully send you that refill, but I'm telling you, please do not carbonate in anything like mason jars. After this bottle, we'll take a minute to talk about growlers. Okay, this bottle's almost done. So, the general broad rule of thumb is you don't want to carbonate in growlers because they're made of the wrong kind of glass. If you got a growler that looks like this, don't carbonate in it. You're going to have that Beanie Baby collection phone call. We're all going to be very sad, and we're going to have to send you a new batch of beer. The exceptions to the rule are if you have a metal, aluminum, stainless steel growler like this guy, or our very popular U-Keg, which also has pressurized dispensing. You can totally carbonate in these, it'll work just fine. Yeah, you can see the U-Keg has a little pressure gauge there. And this one is shaped like a little corny keg. We also have this 2-liter amber growler that has a swing top lid. If you have one of these, you can carbonate in these, and that's just fine. Otherwise, do not carbonate in growlers. We have a whole great blog post on the different kinds of bottles, their pros and cons. None of them is really any better or worse than the other. It kind of just depends what you want. It also goes over the growler issue. We also have a blog post about all this carbonation stuff we've been talking about, and a little bit about the conditioning, which is also a good read. Yeah, if it's too warm, you can blow your caps. I would also note that some things that can cause bottle bombs would include infection with a strain of wild yeast called Brettanomyces. Now, the kind of yeast that you added to your beer will only eat so much sugar, and then it'll stop at a certain point. This is called your finishing gravity. Brettanomyces yeast will keep eating past what the commercial yeast will, and it will also typically cause some funky kind of flavors, which for our more advanced brewers might be a good thing. For you beginners, it's something we're trying to avoid, which goes back to the sanitation and the bottling ones. If you sanitize your equipment properly and use a bottling wand, or at least make sure that you're bottling your beer in such a way that it's not, falling through open air, you should be just fine. Oh, Josh is gonna kill me. I started filling it up before I put in the carbonation drops. Our precious headspace is going to be off. You are gonna go ahead and add carbonation drops or priming sugar no matter what goes into the beer. If you add booster, you use the same amount of priming sugar as always. Same with LME, same with fruit, honey, 2 cans of malt, 3 of them. If you put Jolly Ranchers in there, you're still gonna add priming sugar.
Josh is being strict.
Yeah, he's very strict. Let's see. We don't just make fun of Josh on the stream either. We make fun of him right to his face too. Now, a big thing that new brewers have trouble with is rushing the process. They try and rush the fermentation process, the primary fermentation. They try and rush carbonation. They try and rush conditioning. I'm telling you guys, if you are patient and you wait, time will solve about 90% of the problems we encounter. That other 10%, just call us and we'll get you a new refill. The carbonation drops. I'm just on a roll, guys. Skipping steps. Now, a number of off flavors are going to decrease as time in the bottles go on. Acetaldehyde is a chemical that I mentioned that causes kind of a green apple cidery flavor. That will go away as time goes on. However, it will take a long, long time. That's why you want to watch your fermentation temperatures way before we get to this point. Diacetyl is another one of these chemicals. It's usually more of a problem with lagers. It gives your beer a really buttery flavor. It tastes just like movie popcorn. It's kind of weird. But that is one that gets better with time. Flavors caused by infections and flavors caused by oxidation will get worse with time. So if you have a beer you think is infected, my suggestion is to go ahead and give it some time, see if you like the sour kind of taste that develops or the funky kind of taste. If you're getting something that tastes gross, don't bother. Just get a replacement. Alright, well that is just about our whole batch. You're not going to want to tip the fermenter towards you and try and get that last little bit because it's going to bring all that sediment forward. I should have cold crashed this batch. I did not, so I'm leaving a little bit more behind than I would ordinarily while the beer is still nice and clear. But this is a great time to pause and check for questions. So, before we wrap it up for today, does anybody have any questions? As Josh mentions, he will be back on tomorrow to discuss Chromos beer and talk about using dark malts in beers like black IPAs and Schwarz beers. Darker beers that you don't have the roasty flavors you would typically associate with porters and stouts. How do you bottle with a conical fermenter? That is a great question. It will lay out in the conical fermenter instructions that you got the exact process. I don't know if we have any of the parts handy, but basically there's a bottling tube that goes onto where the glass jar would usually go on. and you put your bottle up to that, and it's got a little valve on it that you open and close. You could also put a bottling wand in it. I've had a couple customers do that. I've also had a few brewers who went ahead and drilled a hole for a spigot. This is all more advanced stuff than we would typically go over in a beginner stream, but we did get the question. Facepalm. Josh. So, there we go.
Oh.
It's this little piece right here. As you can see, it screws on. It's got this little piece that clips and unclips to start and stop the flow. Okay, no sugar in bottles for flavor, but spices. Guys, if you're adding stuff for the purpose of adding flavor, it should really be going in the primary fermenter. By the time you're bottling, it's usually too late. You don't want spices floating around in your beer. It's better to do it in the primary and then let it settle out with the rest of the sediment, cold crash, and we'll end up with nice, clear beer. Like Josh says, use spices during fermentation or secondary. We're probably not going to talk much about secondaries on the beginner stream. We would love to try your Smitten Bovine Milk Stout. That's one of my favorite beers. So yes, you can, coffee in the primary. Actually, coffee is one of the only ingredients I would go ahead and add a bottling. I would go ahead and add 1 ounce of cold brew dark roast coffee or espresso in the bottles. It goes really well with stouts and porters, ambers, darker beers. How do you cold crash? Great question. Cold crashing refers to putting that whole fermenter in the fridge for 24 to 48 hours right before you bottle. This makes all that sediment settle to the bottom and become compact, so you end up with as little in the bottles as possible. Like I said, a little bit of sediment's going to be produced during the carbonation stage, but since refrigerating it to drink it is kind of cold crashing it, you're not going to end up with much in the glass. I do recommend drinking from a glass rather than straight from the bottles. Alright, well, thank you guys for watching, and you can tune in tomorrow when we are going to be, like Josh said, brewing the Chromos beer, which is a Schwarz beer. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.